Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I'm Ruthie, and I'm here with...
Thomas.
And we have two fantastic guest hosts with us today. They are...
Hi, my name is Sheila.
And my name is Nicole.
Welcome, Sheila and Nicole. I'm so glad that you are both here with the two of us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you want to be on Sexually Charged Radio today?
I'm really interested in these topics, and I cannot wait to learn more. And that's about it.
How did you find out about being on here?
Through my good friend Sheila.
Yeah, what did she tell you?
She told us we were going to get free food, so I'm still waiting for that. No, I'm kidding.
I was not aware of free food.
That we're going to learn, and we're going to talk about some sexually enhanced and things. What?
Some sexually enhanced things. All right. That's a lot for us to live up to.
My name is Sheila, like I said. Wow, I just repeated myself. Nicole was lying about the free food. I am a psych student who is interested in Ruthie's field of work, and I'm very thankful to have her as one of my profs in my class, my favorite class. Sorry, I apologize for that.
No problem.
As one of my profs, and I really enjoy their class.
I thank you so much. Well, I'm so glad that both of you are here. Thomas, what makes you want to do this?
There was free food promised, apparently.
I ate all the food, sorry.
Why do I love... I love the idea of talking about these topics in a little unconventional form over the radio. I mean, for me, I'm so used to reading the textbooks or reading journal articles, publishing, and you just get too bottled in with academia sometimes. So, this show is just a fun way to talk about important topics and bridge academia and the real world of sex, gender, relationships.
The real world does include sex, at least for some folks.
And what about you, Ruthie? Why are you here?
Yeah, so mine's a little different. So doing sexual health and wellness outreach, I started doing that and thinking of it as a way to prevent sexual assault. But I was doing a lot of work with folks living in domestic violence shelters, and this is certainly not unique to the folks living there by any means, but many of them had never had a neutral or better sexual experience and didn't see sex as something that would ever be positive or could ever be positive. Like, that's just Hollywood. That's not a real life sort of situation. And so, of course, the people who were being abusive were completely responsible for those negative situations. But I also wondered how it might be useful, a good resource or tool for the people that I was working with to think of sex as something that could be positive and that they deserved it to be neutral or better every time with their partners, and to think that that is a real life possibility and that's something that I deserve. And that sort of thought can't happen without realistic conversations around the concerns that we have, around the things that are positive, whatever the case may be. And so in a set of cultures where most folks feel very guarded about sexual well-being and sexual health and sexual problems and all that, so we don't talk about it. It's seen as taboo and inappropriate, and it's just not a very positive thing for us to discuss in many of our circles. That really limits us and causes a lot of problems. So to look at it as just a normal, healthy part of life, that it doesn't require that you be sexually active for the topic of sex or gender, sexuality be normal. And then we can discuss it from all kinds of ways and perhaps have better outcomes with each other and, positive expectations for how we treat others and how we get treated. Mm-hmm. So I like to talk about dirty things in front of others.
Wow. I mean, that kind of blows me out of the wire that I was here for, just for the free food.
Which I ate all of, so there you go. So we have a couple of different questions here. We wanted to start with this one. Is that right? We have them written down in front of us because just about all these questions came from a dorm event that I did recently, and they're all non-identifying questions. So I'll read this one first. I think I may be poly. How do you bring that up with your partner? So I was out with the group that I was poly, so that's why it says, how do you bring that up with your partner? So just initial thoughts on this question. I think I may be poly. How might a person bring that up with their partners?
Before we discuss further, I was just wondering what exactly poly meant, just so that I could be in tune with what we're talking about.
Nicole, that is a fantastic question. So poly is one type of consensually open relationship, which means that people may have emotionally or physically intimate relationships with multiple people. And I mean relationship as any kind of situation. It could be you don't know each other's names, you're never going to see each other again. Or it could be ongoing. But the key in here is that it's consensual. So that means people aren't cheating with each other. We're all above board on this. And non-monogamous. Poly is one type. And so people are using the word poly to kind of mean any open relationship these days, but it, traditionally has more meant multiple relationships that have ongoing emotional intimacy that likely include sexual intimacy too. So kind of ongoing dating stuff with multiple people, although sometimes there's hierarchies and some are primaries and some are not. So that generally is poly. So that, to kind of compare that with, say, swinging, which is about lots of casual sex within a group, and people don't usually think of that as poly, although someone who is poly and has multiple big relationships might also be swinging. So does that confuse everything all the heck for you?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome.
Well,
That was perfect.
And just maybe for clarification too, Ruthie, would you consider poly relationship style, sexual orientation, gender identity,
I would hate to tell other people what to consider it for themselves. There's kind of some debate about thinking of it as a sexual orientation or not. Some people think that all humans are naturally poly. It doesn't necessarily mean they want to pursue that in application, but just that we can all be capable of loving multiple folks and wanting that level of intimacy, whether we decide it's a good idea or we actually want to put up with the scheduling problems or not. So some folks think of it as an orientation and some folks don't. I tend to think of it a little more along the lines of an orientation. I do think that some folks really are, in their heart of hearts, wanting to be monogamous. So that, to me, makes me wonder if perhaps it's an orientation thing.
Yeah, because sometimes it will be used, polyamorous or polysexual.
Mm-hmm.
There are different terms that poly could be referencing to, but maybe for the sake of clarity with this question, let's go with the idea of polyamorous, because that was sort of the context in which that question was presented as.
Well, and I think the asker might be thinking of it a bit like an orientation themselves, because I think I may be poly. It sounds like when people talk to me, like, I think I might be gay, right? And so perhaps along that same kind of line. I'm wondering both how one might tell someone that they're dating that they're poly, but also, especially if you may not identify as poly yourself, how would you want to be told and when would you want to be told? Because I think the when is important as well as the how. Thoughts about this? How about the two of you? Kids these days, how are we telling each other that we're sleeping around?
Well, I know about relationships these days. It's all about the acronym is DTR, which is defining the relationship. So
DTR. So I've heard DTF, but I've never heard DTR before.
DTF is...
That's different.
Yeah, it's a bit different.
I hadn't heard that one, but the first two letters are the same. Anyway, go ahead.
DTR is defining the relationship. So that's, at that point, you've been on wonderful dates, great magicalness happening, and the person turns to the other person and says, so what are we? Or that's when
the talk.
That's when both parties decide, okay, are we going to be monogamous? Are we going to still just be seeing each other but casually type of thing? So I think that at that point would be a good time to bring up if, for example, the other person was saying, hey, so I'd really like if we could make things official, and you just say, hey, let you know, I am poly, so therefore I enjoyed spending time with you. However, I also enjoy spending time with other people as well, type of thing.
So you would see this as it's okay to go on dates for a while, and then at the point where it's defining, then you lay these things out on the table. All right, Nicole, what are your thoughts on this?
I just wanted to say that, first, there is unfortunately a stigma placed, especially I would find around polyamorous, polysexual, anything sorts of people, because a lot of the time it is seen, you want to cheat on your partners, you want to, whatnot, and of course that's not true for all people. So, first of all, you shouldn't be afraid of, who you are inside, whoever, you may identify as, whatever you might identify as. So, of course, just, when to say it, I guess whenever, as Sheila mentioned, I guess when things are starting to either pick up, if you start to feel like this person, you can communicate with them, which should sometimes for some people be in beginning parts of the relationship, but of course it's not like that for all people, so it's all good. But just don't be afraid to communicate in the same way that a polysexual person may be coming out with their sexuality, their orientation to one of their partners. It can be viewed the exact same way that a bisexual, pansexual, anyone who falls under a sexual orientation spectrum, if you even do, the exact same way it can be handled. So just take your time, and whenever you're comfortable, whenever your partner feels comfortable too, I suppose.
Yeah, so I guess the question as you were going from there, that came to mind is there an expectation among kids these days? God, I feel awful having used that expression. I'm mid to late 20s.
Approaching 40.
And is there an expectation around kids these days about monogamy or non-monogamy? So, when I was young, monogamy was sort of the expectation among my friends, that if you went into a relationship, it was going to be monogamous, period.
It sounds like what you're talking about is that there's not the expectation to lock it down until there's been a specific conversation about it, at least in your peer groups that you're talking about. Am I getting that right?
From what I have seen and what I've heard from other friends, in fact, I have a friend who identifies as poly, and they were telling me how when they told the person that they were dating at the time, so that when nothing official happened, they were telling them about polyamory, and the person just looks at them and says, "So do you have orgies all the time? Are you a sex addict?"
Those are so hard to coordinate.
And
getting the physical space, it takes a lot.
Clean up afterwards.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you're protected too, and you're doing it safe and everything.
Resources, yep.
But this is the stigma against that, and just because someone identifies as poly doesn't mean that they're a crazy sex maniac, or even if you like sex, good for you, right? Poly does not equal sex addict. It does not equal orgies. It is
cheating, for that matter,
or cheating even.
Yeah, so here's a thought that I'm wondering about, and I could just be off base, and I just apologize if this is offensive in any way. But if somebody was dating you for, let's say you wanted to be monogamous, I don't know for the two of you, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but let's say you wanted to be monogamous and you had gone out with, but you had not defined the relationship with somebody, 5 or 6 times, I don't know how many is normal, and then they told you at that point, would you feel like they should have told you sooner? Would you feel like you wasted your time or have been deceived in any way? I feel like I get special permission to ask as a poly person, so I hope that was okay.
No, I personally would say that I wouldn't feel too uncomfortable just because, if I cared to I guess that sounds bad, but cared to a certain amount about that person, I'd want them to feel comfortable, being with me in the same way I want to be comfortable being with them. So, again, for, the same people who may identify as, asexual, and then it's, they come out to you as asexual. Some people go into a relationship expecting sex, expecting all these things, and if someone comes out to you as asexual, and whether or not they want to, have sex, to make you happy, whatever may happen, just as long as they're comfortable, as long as you're comfortable. I think it's the same way if you do look at poly as being an orientation. It might not be a choice for some people. It may be, in fact, it isn't a choice for, anyone, I suppose, sorry. But, of course, just making sure everybody's comfortable. So I don't think I'd be uncomfortable.
That's beautiful. I wish I knew more people like you in my age range for dating who are not students. Let's just make that clear. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of layers here, and I think the part that comes to me is that we don't always know what our preference is in relationship style right at the beginning of a relationship.
Truth.
That, you start off with someone and say, we're going to be monogamous, this is how we're going to go. But then a little ways into it, you realize that, maybe you're looking to expand and to go into more of a poly relationship style. Or it could be the opposite. You might start off a relationship saying, you know what, I'm through and through poly oriented, and then realize 2 months into it that, I'm actually feeling that I'd rather this be a monogamous relationship, and that change can happen.
Absolutely.
And so you can't necessarily put that expectation that it has to be at the beginning of a relationship, because there's fluidity throughout.
Well, and the wording can also stay the same while the behaviors change, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So I know plenty of folks who identify as poly in their hearts, but they just don't have the time or space or energy to be dating multiple people. So the relationship looks monogamous to others, but they consider themselves to be poly. I know plenty of folks who are monogamish or monogamous. So they really in their hearts define themselves as monogamous, but there are things that they do with other people that other folks might consider to be crossing a line in their own relationships, or to not be monogamous, but you get to define that for yourself, right?
What are you thinking, Sheila? I feel like there's lots going through your head right now.
Oh my goodness, I just blanked. Back to the question that Ruthie asked. when would I want someone to tell me that they are poly? And if they did, like if I was wasting
When
my
you
time.
feel like you had wasted your time dating ahead of time, because that's certainly a concern that I have when I have to think about when to tell people, is that they'll be offended that I bait and switched them or something like that.
Well, one thing I'd consider was, did I have fun with this person? Yes, then that wasn't a waste of time. Then there's nothing to regret. If I had fun, I felt safe, I felt comfortable, I felt respected, there's no waste of time, there's no regret. And also that, in a sense, it could be coming out, but this does take a lot of courage, in my opinion, to tell someone something so personal about yourself that you haven't really built up a huge relationship on yet. And as we have discussed previously, there is a lot of negative connotations in the media about poly people. So that could be running through that person's mind. And for them to come out and tell me, I'd have respect for that. And, and what you were saying, Thomas, like, you don't know yourself what type of relationship you want until you try it out. Or maybe you haven't even tried it out before and you're open to it. So that's how I look at it.
So much hope for the future and the younger generations, Thomas. That's totally true. The way I answered the question in the group is that I only date other people who are poly. So I need them to know that about me, and I need to know that about them. I've been through a little too much of helping people come out as poly and watching stuff crash and burn, and then they decide it's just not worth it. And so for me, that's a safety boundary around myself and my own personal energy. And it's also harder on my other relationships when I have to be doing a lot of nurturance and helping a new person that's in the relationship in the poly situation too. That means less time for my other partners as well, and a lot more stress on me. But I really like the way you're explaining it as well.
And explaining it on Sexually Charged Radio at CFRU 93.3 FM, which you can also listen to us at CFRU.ca, or you can YouTube us, Sexually Charged Radio, to listen to some of our past radio shows.
You can send in your own questions to Ask SC. Those are the initials for Sexually Charged. So Ask SC at uaguelph.ca. Those questions go to the fantastic folks at Student Wellness, which is over in Student Affairs. And they read through the questions and send some our way and help us with some background research and do the editing and are super, super important collaboration for this show.
Thank you, Wellness.
Yay.
Woo-hoo.
Shall we go on to the next question?
Sure.
It's just one word because it's a story. Would you like to share a story with us, Sheila?
Yeah, so the word that Dr. Ruthie, I am sorry for the formality. I'm just so used to it in class. The word in front of us right here is demisexual, and I'm a person who identifies as demisexual. Now, for the people listening out there who don't know what demisexual is a sexuality on the asexuality spectrum. And it kind of falls in the middle, as what they say, between asexuality and gray sexuality. So demisexuality is you don't really have a sexual attraction to a person unless you know them through an emotional bond. And that is what I identify as. So the story here is I was explaining to my friend about demisexuality and how I just recently realized that, hey, this is something I identify with and that makes a lot of sense to me and helps me come to terms with who I am. And the person just looks at me and with a really puzzled look on their face and says, wait, isn't everyone like that? So this is what we're going to clear up today here with the help of Ruthie and Thomas and Nicole.
Yeah, so we are I think that this is a bold question for someone to ask, but I also want to recognize that that may have been in some way uncomfortable or just deflating for you, whatever the case may be, and what it's like to be a person who identifies as, I guess, a not so mainstream category of anything, and that just talking about yourself means constantly having to find and defend yourself. And so while I'm sure that question was well-meaning, it also called you to have to defend your identity as being a thing. And while this is a microaggression, which is what happens when people who are very well-meaning and think that they don't have a bias issue accidentally slip up and do these things, or not so accidentally, depending on the person. And one of the worst ways to really treat a person is to question whether they exist or not. And so there's kind of different levels of awareness and outreach and things like that. And before we even get to awareness raising, it's just defending your existence. And so to remove another person's existence, and they say, well, they're not removing your existence, but it's a part of your identity. So it really is, in a matter of fact. So I'm very sorry that happened to you.
Can I add something in?
Yeah.
That is like when someone is to tell their friend or family member, hey, I'm gay, hey, I'm bi, whatever you want to, whatever sexuality you identify, and they look at you and said, it's just a phase.
Haven't met the right person yet.
Yeah, that is how, in that situation, it felt like, and I understand that that person may not have wanted that, but that's just something.
They should Google microaggressions and read about that a little bit. So I do want to just recognize that that's a shitty thing that happened. I can say it because we play late at night.
Midnight.
So there's defining demisexual, and so there's the concept of emotional intimacy, and I think they're confusing emotional intimacy with orientation of demisexual. So maybe we can come up with a few examples. So, for someone who does not identify as demisexual, you might get a lusty crush on a celebrity or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's less likely to happen in a demisexual situation because there hasn't been that emotional bond. But you can also be demisexual and other terms at the same time, right? So you can be demisexual straight, demisexual gay, demisexual pansexual.
There's even demisexual, an aromantic demisexual or romantic demisexual. I don't know if I think Ruthie would explain that a little bit better.
Or Thomas, do you want to jump in?
You know what? These are newer terms for me as well, so I would feel amiss trying to describe it and possibly do the wrong job. So
putting the letter A at the beginning, which is not just Canadian with an EH, but is actually the letter A, means not or without or an absence of, right? And these kind of have Latin roots and things like that. So if you're asexual, it means that without sexual drive or orientation or interest or whatever. And so there would even be different ways of defining that, because certainly there are plenty of asexual people who like to masturbate or whatever the case may be, or do have sex with other people and enjoy it, but perhaps not in the same kind of carnal lust-driven way that we associate with sex drive. So demi means, so this, I used to sell clothes to get through undergrad. That was one of my part-time jobs. So I worked in a store that sold underwear. So I always think of a demi-cut bra with this, which is a bra cup that's a half cup, right? So demi means like a portion of or a specific focus upon,
I'm
or
learning
whatever the
so
case
much
may be.
today.
So there you go. So demisexual, meaning that there is sexuality and sexual orientation, but for a specific focus. And in this case, it's a sense of emotional connection or bond, which doesn't have anything to do with what kind of sex you have with people or what people you are having sex with, or if you're having sex with people at all. It just has to do with the sexual type of attraction. So an A before the word romantic would mean what? What's an aromantic?
Aromantic is a person who doesn't really like romance, from what I've heard. I have a friend who identifies that, and they said they don't really care about the whole romantic gestures like flowers and chocolates and hand holding and kissing, but they just want to enjoy their time with the person without all that affection, really.
And these are all kind of fall into a scale of ace or asexual, even though kind of asexual is its own thing. Often that's the umbrella term for all the, and gray sexuals and all sorts of folks. So we have words like transphobia and homophobia and heteronormism and stuff. So allosexism is generally the bias or bigotry against folks who identify somewhere in the ace area. So that's good to know. I believe it's asexuality.org. Maybe someone can look that up on their phone, but that's a really useful website around awareness raising and identity for this as well. We still have a couple of minutes left, so maybe I can combine this with the prior question, which is, I'm just going to change the last question and put this word in. I think I may be demisexual. How do you tell that to people that you're dating or interested in dating? What are your thoughts? Nicole, do you have any thoughts? I hate to cut you out of the conversation here.
Sure. I was just thinking, like, unfortunately, like, demisexual, like, poly, like, amorous, polysexual, it's, like, just a few of those terms that are, like, sexuality, sexual orientation, that are a little less known, along with, like, pansexuality, even, like, asexuality is, like, becoming more popular, like, thankfully, and, like, the awareness and whatnot, but unfortunately, there are misconceptions, there are misunderstandings, whether or not you just haven't heard the term before, you don't understand what it means. So bringing that up to your partners, I guess it's just, again, the level of communication that you use with your partners, making sure you are both comfortable, making sure it's someone that you feel comfortable, like, bringing this up to, because, again, it takes a lot of courage to do so, and it takes a lot of bravery and, like, knowing yourself, like, finally being able to identify yourself as a sort of orientation. It's, like, very, like, good for you. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. So it's very important, I think, that you bring it up to your partners and, whenever you're comfortable.
I think of poly as something that you kind of owe to tell others because there's a consent around involvement of other people and that expectation, right? But I don't know that anyone owes anyone else to have to disclose that, although you may want to, depending on the type of relationship as far as demisexual goes. And probably that thing with poly is up for debate too, but I guess that's how I think about it for myself. What are your thoughts, Sheila?
One thing that I've heard from other friends of mine who identifies that is that when they have told their partners they are demisexual and they've explained it thoroughly, they look at them and they said, oh, so does this mean you're not attracted to me? Demisexuality, one of the definitions is that we experience two attractions. So the first stage is physical attraction, and the second stage, after a period of time, after more emotional intimacy, is the sexual attraction. So just because your partner may tell you that, hey, I'm demisexual, that doesn't mean that you're not appealing to them. It just means that they are not ready to have sexual relations or whatever they define as sexual actions or sexual activity with you.
What do I think if this is a person so myself as a person who does not identify as demisexual, if I were dating someone who did identify as demisexual, I'm spending time with them, I like their time and company, to me this would just be a word put on a part of them that I already love or like or appreciate. Maybe I did not understand the ramifications or what it meant for me, but I really like them and I like their company, so I would think that I'm just learning more about the things that I like for them and different ways to be respectful and honoring of that person. Maybe that's utopian, but that's what I would think.
Well, and I even think that there's probably something there about if you're in a relationship with someone who identifies as demisexual, they have made that agreement to be in that relationship. Hopefully it is a consensual agreement to be in a relationship. If not, listen to some of our other podcasts around consent. And so for me, if someone were to come out and disclose that information to me, I would be kind of honored. I'd be like, wow, this person feels that way about me, and that person is willing to disclose this to me. Mm-hmm. Like, that's so...
a risk. That's great.
Yeah, that is, for me, that adds into that emotional depth and relationship for that information to be disclosed. But I mean, that is me, and, other people might react differently, so please do not generalize my comments, because you should know who your partner is and, hopefully know a bit about what their reactions will be. But for me, that's a sign of intimacy and honor.
Absolutely. So we are right at the end of our show. So I'm wondering if each of us just have a couple of words of thought, either to Sheila, to people in the position of Sheila's friend, or just to the general world about this topic.
Just demisexuality is like sexuality. That doesn't change you as a person. You still have a capability to love. That doesn't change your value. I think that's about it I have.
Yeah, thoughts?
And again, whatever helps you identify yourself better, whether it be demisexuality, whether it be whatever kind of sexual orientation, it's a better way to understand yourself as a person, and that's a beautiful thing, and it's something almost everybody should do if they feel comfortable to do so.
Thomas, your thoughts?
You do you.
Maybe literally. I have no thoughts after that. Thank you so much for joining us on Sexually Charged Radio. We super appreciate having Nicole and Sheila here. And I'm Ruthie.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And this is...
I'm Thomas. Until our next time on Sexually Charged Radio, have a good night.
And send us questions at asksc@uaguelph.ca.